right, everyone. Welcome to the Stoa. Quite excited about this session because we have Alanja Forsberg with us today. Alanja is the founder of Avalon, lead facilitator of Avalon Worldwide Retreats and the Surrender Unity Leadership Training. She has a long life in engaging in the mystery. I think she calls herself a cosmic navigator. So I'm quite excited to have her here at the Stoa. She was here previously with Forrest Landry, and whose Forrest is here today as well, and when he was a sense maker in residence at the Stoa. And I reached out to Alanja to talk about surrender, and then suggest the title Virtue of Surrender, because virtue is one of the themes that we're exploring in year 2 of the Stoa. And I thought it'd be cool to have a session on both of them. So how today's going to work, I will take an Alanja in a moment. She'll share her thoughts on the theme, and I think we might have some breakout rooms, and then we'll do some Q&A. So if you have anything, questions or maybe thoughts to share, just indicate that in the chat, and then I'll call on you during that portion. You can unmute yourself, and you can ask your question. If you don't want to be on YouTube, because this will be on YouTube, just indicate that in the chat. So that being said, Alanja, welcome to the Stoa.
Thank you. And hello to everyone. And to everyone I know, thank you. Hello for being here. Yeah, I have a little prayer for all of you. I would love for you to turn your cameras on, as I'm super energetic, and I'd love to see you and feel more aliveness in between us as we dive into the surrender. And I've very properly prepared for this session by completely just surrendering, not preparing anything. So I would love for us to be in like really curiosity, and I would love for everyone to like really feel into you. What does this mean to you? Like, what does surrender mean to you? And I want to share with you first, like some of the levels of surrender that I want us to have reflection around. And I also want to discern a little bit what kind of surrender we're not going into to this call. And then I really hope that we can go into groups of 3 people and have like maybe 5 or 6 minutes for you to really tune into what touched you about what I spoke about, what caught your interest, where are you in your surrender, and how does this lead you in your life or not. So I'd love for that to happen. And I also, any questions, I will be really bad at reading at the same time. So please use Peter for that. And I hope you will bring me what comes up, Peter. Okay. So first of all, I imagine that Stoa people know quite a lot about integral theory. Can I have some hands if that's the truth? Okay, so in every way of seeing surrender, we actually need to look from where does the surrender come in a person. You know, you have a child coming down the hill, the child is silent, but as he sees the mother, the child starts screaming, surrenders into the cry of the hurt that happened 10 minutes earlier, right? This is not the surrender we're talking about. We're not talking about surrendering into archetypes. We're not talking about surrendering into chaos. Where I would like for us to go and to have our curiosity is like, how can being in the virtue of surrender be a leading theme for where we are at in our evolution? And so the levels of surrender that I want to speak about, and I hope interest you all, is from above an integral level of development. So before you know who you are, what we would call like an integral, that you've come to the place where you don't need to ask other people who you are anymore. You've come to an integration of your feminine and masculine. You do know that you have all the previous stages of evolution in you. And you've come to a place where you, if someone says to me in that stage, like, Alanja, you're a fucked up shit bag. what I will do is to check that with myself. Am I really a fucked up shit bag in this moment, or am I not? And it would be my decision on that. And I could either say, well, actually, I think you're right, or I could say, no, I don't agree with you in that. But it will be from my own moral. I have the capacity to check on myself in connection with another human being. So from there, that level of consciousness, a person can surrender to deeper and deeper layers of truth insight. So if I'm in connection with you, Peter, I could say that, oh, Peter, I really like your beard. I think it's super cool. And then I could surrender to a deeper part of me saying, like, Peter, really, I feel very seen by being invited here. And then I could go a deeper layer and say, Peter, you know what? I'm thrilled to be here, but I'm honestly quite nervous that I won't be able to answer all the questions or maybe say something wrong. And so I can dive into deeper and deeper truth in me in connection with you and with the Stoa community. So that's a choice I have, as long as I have an integrity or identity in me that can discern who I am and can go deeper and deeper inside of the inside of me. Same with me in connection with you. I can surrender to deeper and deeper individual connection with you on body, mind, and spirit. So that's like the first level of surrender I want to bring in. The next level of surrender, I'm sure you've all been in groups, and then something happens in the group, and then people say, oh, I feel there's death in the room, or there's like, oh, there's sexual energy in the room. And so to be able to feel a collective field, you'll have to be able to surrender first to yourself and then to the collective field. And so from there, you can tune and taste into higher level of consciousness in togetherness. And so we would call this from spiral dynamics, we're talking about yellow and turquoise. And then there's a huge shift to the next level of surrender. And this is where I want for your ears to really sharpen up. So never mind the words that I'm using. Find your own words. But there is a next level of surrender where you can individually surrender to the divine or source or whatever higher self. Actually, your ego or your persona steps to the side, and something that you couldn't even think about in your mind comes through you. You become a vehicle for something that is bigger or has something to bring through you. So you become a channel for something bigger than you. That level of surrender I would call divine individual surrender. And then we have the last discernment to make is when a person is in capacity of individually surrender to the divine. There could be a collective divine surrender with others that has the same capacity. So you have 4 stages of individual surrender, collective surrender, individual divine surrender, individual collective surrender. So what I have seen in my life is that working in the Norwegian psychiatry for 15 years, actually people that was in these kind of surrender would be seen as psychotic or not having their feet on the ground. They might have a download that was huge, having problems to integrate them into the body level of integration. And so therefore, I see it as a very, very important task for us to be able to recognize what are we actually seeing, both in ourselves and in others. Because what my experience is, more and more people are coming to the place where they can surrender from deeper and deeper parts. And in that, you need to be seen. So when I do these kind of surrender, it really doesn't always come out glorious for my own person. But if you asked me if I would do it again, the answer would be yes. A divine surrender would never feel, or I don't think, or I haven't experienced, that it would be any time against anyone or any time not pure. And this is the discernment of it. It's like there's a knowing when you see it or you're bringing it, there's a knowing that there's a high degree of purity in it. And you will have to live with the consequences after. And yeah, I just want to share with you, are these 4 stages in a way clear for you, or do you have any questions for this?
And if anyone has any questions, maybe just put in the chat or raise your hand and we can call on you.
Okay, so that's super clear then, right? Okay. So then going to the virtue of surrender. With every surrender, there's like you're passing something that brings in a way a need for courage, you know, because you're surrendering into something unknown. That's the thing, you know. If I lead myself into something, I have a clear vision of what's going to happen. I'm clear about what I will find, and I will lead myself into that. With the surrender of this kind, you actually do not know what you're surrendering to or what you will find. So learning to live in this kind of surrender is really a path of being courageously in your discernment and your willingness to surrender. So having the question in myself and in others as I teach, how do we actually live from surrender? Is it just to say like, oh yeah, oh, I just surrendered, so shit happened, you know? Or did I actually lead myself into the moment where I surrendered? Is there a path there? You know, when you're asked to surrender, you feel this, it's like it's quite easy to surrender to deeper layers of me because, yeah, I can do authentic training. I can learn to be more and more authentic. I can learn to be more and more bold in groups and say what I'm sharing that I think or feel that the group is feeling. But when it comes to the surrender, when the I needs to put aside, this is where we really struggle. Because there is it called a threshold? What does that mean? A threshold? Like you have to pass over your own need for knowing what's going to happen, you know? So is it then possible to train myself to have deeper and deeper capacity to surrender? Yes, I do think so. But that's a choice. And it's also a choice to find out from where in me do I surrender. I can choose to surrender into this group of people, and I can share with you the crazy stuff that I've been with in my life, and it might inspire you, or it might scare well, I'm sorry. Can you say shit out of you in English? Thank you. I'm sorry. I'm quite rude in my language. I'm Norwegian, okay? So, can surrender be joyful, and can a path of surrender give a life that has a deeper connection to source, that has a deeper connection to the depth of me, that can actually help me explore my spirituality, my capacity to be with nature, my capacity to be with you, my capacity to be with my children? Can I let my self leadership be leadershiped by me instead of being leadershiped? That's the question. So I would love to have an inspirational talk about you, because living in surrender has given me a life that is so full of incredible encounters, miracles, ways of being with humans that I've never would have been able to meet or experience if it wasn't for the fact that I was willing to surrender. So I would love to give I've given one example, maybe not the best one, for the first stage and the second stage of surrender. You know, you're in a group, and then the group suddenly just starts to chant together or sing together, and you can feel like the collective field is coming together, and someone was courageous enough to start to sing. There was one person that was courageously inviting into a collective surrender, right? Are you that person? Do you do that? Do you have examples from your life where you've courageously brought out something that you know could have immediately been denied or destroyed or whatever, but you brought it anyway, and the collective responded? There's magic in that. Because very often surrender and the virtue of surrender is to find the middle way, the way that encounters both the extreme chaos and the extreme stagnation. There's movement in surrender. There's an energetically movement, which creates some kind of change or insight for you and the others around you. So I want to share my first meeting with what I would call like an insight of surrender for me. It was in 1997. I was exhausted. I'd been to my training for psychodrama therapist training. 1 week I hadn't slept. I was completely exhausted. And then something really incredible happened, because I had a very good friend, an old lady that I'd been at school with for 2.5 years, and I loved her with all my heart. And we were getting our exams, and we were 62 people sitting in a room. And then when we came to receive our certificate, there were 62 chairs, but one person was missing. And this was this friend of mine. And then the main teacher, she went and stood behind the chair, and she said, like, in a way, kind of like, shame on you, like, you shouldn't have done this and you're not welcome here anymore. And I felt like this is so unjust. And you know, the whole principle of psychodrama is to shift roles so the person that is not there gets to speak. And that didn't happen. In a way, she just pushed her down. And, you know, I was sitting on my chair, holding my hands on the chair. I'm going to sit, I'm going to sit, I'm going to sit. And then the teacher, which was an old wise woman, she went and sat down. And then she said, if something is to be said, let it be said. And my whole body was shaking. I was just like, no, 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 no. But then I experienced my body rise up, my soul go to the side. I looked down, my chest opened, and it was flames standing out of my chest, and like the whole room. And I heard myself speak. I didn't know what language or what I said. No, nothing. And then I sat down, and there was silence. And the crazy thing is, no one remembers what I said. And I knew, and then I became this little afterwards, because the energy that had run through me was so strong. And what happened after that was that this teacher called me and said, well, Alanja, you're a genius, but I can't let you continue at school. I will have to let you go because my teachers are afraid of you. But hey, you're young, you can come back later. And I felt it like, oh, what a punishment. Like this was the school that I loved. This was the one thing that I'd finally found something that I burned for. And I was cut out. But if you had asked me, would you do the same again? My answer would be yes. So with this, I would like for you to go into groups and just discuss a little bit about what virtue of surrender have you tasted? What would be interesting to call upon further in our call together? Because I really want for us to be in connection on this, and for you to bring forward your curiosity. And it doesn't matter actually what you talk about, like just see if anything touched you, come together and share with each other for 5 or 6 minutes. Can we do that?
And so 6 minutes, 3 people per group. Does that
Yeah,
work?
super good.
Cool, cool.
Yeah.
All right. So some groups might have 4, but we'll
That's
put
okay.
them.
Create questions. The most crazy ones are welcome, okay? Surrender. Go with it.
All right, let's do it.
Thank you. Yeah. So how was that? Is there anyone that wants to share something?
And yeah, feel free just to jump off mute, I think. Skylar, you have something?
Yeah. Hi, Alanja. It's
Hello.
so nice to meet you. Heard a lot about your work for a long time, so I feel very honored to be here. So my curiosity was around discernment. You mentioned discernment, and I was hoping you could say more about that. And in our group, we talked very briefly about whether there's a choice point. In my experience, there's usually a moment where I can feel the possibility arising, or I feel something, like you were saying, that describing that experience of the preamble to whatever that experience was in the room. I can feel it coming, whatever that possibility is, and then I do feel like there's a choice to be made. And I'm just really curious about that space. And I think that'd be helpful for me to hear from you on that.
Yeah, that's very interesting, because you do have the same when a trauma is on its way to you, is actually quite similar feeling with the surrender. On higher stages of surrender, you get this like, oh no, oh yeah, and then you do know that you have a choice. But it also is, so if we could speak about discernment on like an integral level of surrender, I actually do have a choice. Really, I can choose. I can feel I don't want to do it, or I want to do it, or I don't want to do it, or I can fight it a little bit, but I do have the choice, right? But when it comes to my experience, at least with the individual divine surrender, at when you're there, in the end of that, the choice that I get, either I surrender or I faint. So I can, of course, I can choose to faint. That's a good choice, and I've tried that several times. It doesn't even always then work, because there is something that wants to come through. So, but the discernment, I really would love for you to be curious about, like, when it comes to surrender, my experience of that is, it's never for me personally. It's like, even if I bring myself to a deeper layer, it's always for sharing something at a deeper level of either trust or vulnerability or love, or whatever quality the surrender wants you to dive into. There has to be this willingness to step over the threshold. And in that, you do have the choice, right? Except from when the divine really wants to use you and go through you. And I imagine also that Forrest would have a lot to say on that, and also even Odinga. So guys, you're invited in if you have more discernment on it. I'll bring you in as if you have that.
Skylar, any follow-up to that?
No.
Yeah, I will follow up if they don't. Also, yeah. You have something to say, Forrest?
I had a little bit of a remark. I think that one of the things that I really like about the notion of discernment is how it brings us into a focus on integrity. Like, so in the breakout group, I kind of came to understand a little bit about surrender as essentially trusting in one's integrity and trusting in the integrity of one's connection to spirit or to the world or to the other in relationship or to the group. And so in a sense, the discernment is essentially looking at the integrity, looking at the detail of the connection, and basically trusting one's perception of one's integrity, or trusting the perception of the integrity of the relationship or the group, or one's connection to source or to world or to other. And so that specific piece about discernment, at least that was a reflection that is occurring, and I feeling the moment of that.
Thank you. And also that is super important. Like, really what I want for everyone here to be inspired to is to really to be able to recognize when another human being, when a fellow human being is surrendering, for us to be able to see where they're coming from and to be there and to, I'm sure you've been in a group and the ice is standing still and something feels uncomfortable, and then some person actually comes with some kind of truth that just lands and opens the space. It's not the trickster. It's not the helper. It's not the survival patterns that are coming through. It's a person that is linked to a deeper truth and just can so, well, here's the elephant, or here is what I'm sensing in this moment. And it releases the contraction. And for you to stay curious, like, how can I be with this person? How can I lean into that kind of surrender? How can I lean into and let myself be a part of that collective surrender that this person is bringing in? Because there's something we do know about, like, if there is truth, if there is light, if there is love, if there is something, it's like an even being, like it could even be a person coming with a truth of discernment of something that needs to die. A person in the group might have a huge self-deceit, and one person surrenders to bring from heart a sword that is so pure that the person feels an opening and relief, and not feeling that this person wants to take me down. It's for me, and I am relieved for that coming through, truth coming through. So for us to learn to have these kind of curiosities onto, like, could this be a deep surrender? And if it is a deep surrender, how can I link onto that? Do I see a beauty? Do I see truth? Do I see something that I know in some way is miraculously out of the box, and still it has value? It has value. It brings something. Yeah. Skylar, does that give you something?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
There's some activity in the chat. I'll take in someone in a moment, but I have a follow-up question on that thread. So I've had experiences with sort of like what you call, was it divine individual surrender, or at least glimpses of it. And it's sort of like your character gets lubricated for something to channel through you. But I've had experiences where almost like demonic energy got channeled through me, and it got pretty dark and scary. And so this is sort of like that discernment thing. And any thoughts on that? Like how to sort of be protective against energies that will do harm for you and others?
Well, first of all, I would be super curious. Like, are you sure? And if so, I would be very, very curious about that. I would actually sit still and ask a friend to go with me and to surrender into the archetype of that. What is it really that wants to come forward? And to taste it fully. And in that, you do have discernment. You can have a choice. But I think, Peter, very often when something wants to come through, And I didn't think I should talk about this today, but there are certain capacities that might needs to be released. That is not you, fully you. And I would love for you to be curious about that. Does this feel like you? Does it feel like it's you surrendering to a higher self of you? Or does it feel like something that isn't you, but it has a distinct way of operating that is known to you, that might have been with you for a lifetime, or for a while, or for a time? Does that give you, I don't know how spiritual Stoa is, whether we should go where you're taking us now.
It can get pretty woo here, so feel free to go wherever you'd like to go. So yeah, I will reflect on that regarding my experiences there. But Steve, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, Steve had a question that I was also considering about sort of like surrendering in sort of the wild, interpersonal wild, or versus in a kind of a container. And perhaps I can take in Steve to elaborate on his question.
Yeah, I don't get like the wild nature or wild psychotic.
Well, I just am using poetic language, just like everyday life. So like kind of surrendering during everyday life versus surrendering in sort of like a container where there's a guide there, and then they're helping the process be midwifed. And Steve has a related question, so perhaps just to take him and see if.
Okay, let's hear what Steve has to say.
Okay, here's my question. How can surrender play out in a day-to-day way as opposed to an activity devoted to surrender like meditation or circling?
So I think it's about the journey you're on. If you sit and meditate and you open your heart and you let that openness and that heart go with you into life after the meditation, is in a way the same way with the surrender. As when you really start to get the taste of the beauty of surrender, that becomes something that you then become curious of, and that is more in your awareness. So you get the small nudges more and more. It appears in your life, like, oh, here I have a choice, as Skylar was saying, like, yeah, I do know that I'm called upon sometimes, and if you then go over that threshold and you do surrender, well, then that becomes something that is possible, and it becomes this flower that can just emanate, or the possibility increases for you to live in surrender. And I will share one of the craziest ones that I experienced, because I think it gives a little bit of how crazy it can be and how in real life. So 17th of May is a very unique day in Norway. We celebrate our national day. It's the children festival. Everyone is happy. Everyone is outside. Everyone is with their friends. And I was sitting on the top of a hill on a cafe with a stairs, like stone stairs down, very far down. And I was wearing my Norwegian traditional suit, which is white shirt and broderies on. And I was sitting there, and then suddenly there was a voice saying to me, go and stand at the stairs, on the top of the stairs. And I was like, no, thank you. I am having my meal. I have my drink here. I have my food. I have whatever I need. I have my friends. I don't need to go anywhere. And then the voice came back, well, go to the stairs. And that night, who's talking? Like, really? And then in the end, my body just rose up, and I was standing there on the stairs, and I was just looking forward. It's like, yeah, nice view. Like, really, my food is getting cold. Why am I standing here? Like, really? And then I heard rapid footsteps behind me. And then there was a man coming running, and he tumbled and fell, and he really destroyed his head. So his face went into two, and he was just laying there. And then I was like, oh, so that's why I'm here. So I went down to him, took his face together, held him, and stopped the bleeding. and then ask the people next to call the ambulance. And so they did. And then the ambulance take him, and he is transported to hospital. And I go up and I wash my hands and I sit down and I eat my dinner. These are things that can just happen, like you're called for. You have a mission, you have something to do. And very often that is the case when we surrender. We get to understand afterwards, like, oh, that was why I was called to in this situation. This is something that I can do, right? So what is it that you can do? What are you called for? You have a unique capacity in you, and that will be called for. So when you start listening, start, like, some people hear things. I'm forever jealous of my husband. He can hear things. I can get these pictures or that voice once, but you know, we all have our gifts, and it's like, what is your gift to surrender to? And for my part, it's very often some kind of healing capacity, or to create situations where contractions releases. This is one of the things that I'm called for. What are you called for? So stay curious in your day-to-day life. What is your red thread? And I often say that where you will surrender will often be in line with your devotion. And your devotion is in line in what is it that you cannot not do in your life? What is the thread since you were a little boy or a little girl? What are the things that you could not do? That's where you will find your devotion, and also very often the room for you to surrender within. So be curious, and be curious about other people also, because this is a journey of courageous boldness and compassion and willingness to be that crazy person that actually acts upon those requests. And you know, we're terrified afterwards. Like, I'm this small. In the beginning, when all of this crazy stuff was happening, I was like this small. And I was like, who can teach me something about this? Who has experienced this before? And I tried to find people, you know, but there are very few that at that point in 1995 were writing about surrender the way we're talking about it here today. So when you're called for, when your heart is beating and you want to resist, see if you can courageously go with instead, and then see what happened. And then be willing to see it from the discernment, like, where did I operate from now? And if I need help, if I need, like, this story was so crazy. You know, I never shared the story that I shared with you now. I didn't share that with anyone for many, 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 many years. Because that's crazy, right? But now I'm doing crazy stuff all the time. So that's normal now. But in the beginning, these things are like, wow, could I really do that? I'm not sure I would be able to do that tomorrow if it happened again. I have no idea. But I was willing to courageously surrender. No, not true. I listened to the voice in my head that time, and I stood there as a very stupid person on 17th of May and my food getting cold. But when this guy came, I knew what I needed to surrender to, right? Further. Yeah. Was there any more questions?
Forrest, you unmuted yourself. Did you have?
I just had one kind of small thing. In the question of how does surrender show up day to day, I was reminded of the example. I trust myself well enough to know that I will say something that's meaningful. Like there's a sense of deep trust that one basically flows into the day from oneself, and the more that you have this sense of trusting your integrity, the more that you just feel free to speak. And so there's, even in that very small way, there's a kind of surrender there, because I don't necessarily know, and I'm pretty sure, Alanja, you don't necessarily know the next thing you're going to say before you say it, right? We just know that it's okay. And so in that day-to-day sense, there's a real way in which surrender shows up for all of us. I think that in regards to the question of what happens if we don't surrender, if we don't move into this space? Because I saw that question also go by a moment ago. It was at any time we don't trust our intuition, or any time that we close the door on the prompts that we feel, we feel this prompt, I should go stand in this place. In Alanja's story, there's a sense to affirm the connection one has with one's source, or the chance to affirm the connection that one has. And so in a sense, it's like I trust in the integrity of the connection. And by trusting the integrity of the connection, I increase the integrity of the connection. I trust myself to trust myself more. I trust myself to know when to trust myself, or I trust myself to know when I'm discerning correctly that this is a moment that I should act in complete unknowingness, versus this is a moment where it's probably my ego that's speaking up. And so, in effect, as we learn to trust ourselves more, we get more easy to know how to do the discernment of when to trust ourselves more. So that's the benefit of going with the trust, is that we learn that discernment. It's like, even in the cases where we decide not to, we don't necessarily get to know that, but in the cases where we decide to go with it, we learn the discernment either way. So there's always a little bit of increase in trust and integrity and such when we trust the surrender. I'm not sure I'm putting it super well, but that was, I guess, yeah.
You are super well. And by also from Steve, then that is like, when you've done it once, it will be easier the next time, and easier and easier. But I need to be honest, even today, like 20 years later, I can still fight it. Like, really, like, I don't want to, don't talk to me, don't come with something, like I'm having fun, like I'm being normal, like there's a part of me that wants to resist it, but I do know, and I can trust. But it's also, it's like, if you are a speaker and you want to speak, and you want to speak from surrender, see, how can I just talk in flow? In the beginning, that can be so bad, you start a meditation and you can just hear, it's like, this is not good. And then you stumble, and then you fall, and you say some stupid things, but then you allow yourself to go further and suddenly you are talking a Dharma talk that you had not planned, that really lands within the whole group at the perfect level that they can receive. So it's not also, it's just like, oh, I'm surrendering and perfect. No, it is a journey of surrendering to the surrender until I'm in a way clear of being that vehicle. And not to shame or blame or say like, okay, that was a really, really shitty start of your Dharma talk, Alanja Forsberg. Yes, it was, but wasn't the end good? Something about being willing to say, okay, I'm learning this. It's a journey of courageously putting me out there into the not knowing, and being that vehicle, and having to live with the consequences after. Like, you can very often be put on a pedestal, or you get this one, but still you are moving with the energy that is alive in you, and courageously moving with it. Yeah.
So I'm just being mindful of the time. You're cool to sneak in one more question. And Laura, I think you have a really good one to end us off with.
Hi, thank you so much for joining. I guess I've got too many questions. I'm not sure which one to ask, but I've got one question about like the process of purification, like how, yeah, it feels to me like in moments where I have felt like something is expressed through me, sometimes afterwards it feels like there's a demand to live in a certain way, kind of to live in alignment with that expression. And then I also notice it seems like certain periods of my life there's more expression.
Laura, I can't hear. I got the question about purity and like the individuation of that, yeah. But then
and then also like the process of purification that allows more expression. more fully, more frequently. Because it seems to me like there are periods of my life where somehow I felt more in alignment, and that it gives rise in me more frequently. And then when I'm more out of alignment, it doesn't as much. But then I also have a second question about healing wounds that occur while surrendering, when breaches of trust have occurred in that really surrendered state. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you. I think I got the first part of that question. And I know that Odinga can really answer that really good, but I will give it a try first. It's like it's an everlasting purification. So if you think about alchemy and that the stages of change there, when you've come quite far up in the process of alchemy, there is purification again and again and again and again and again and again. And I think about that as like if you have a raw stone and you start to polish it, it's like you can actually polish it forever. It can always become clearer. It can always have an even more smooth and even more beautiful surface, you know? So, and I think that also my journey with surrender is that the more that I've been on the path of the surrender, the more I've had to learn about energies, vibrations, frequencies, all of these things, like what is coming through me, like, you know, it doesn't always even have words, you know, it could be through my hands, it could be through my solar plexus, it could be me just holding a space in a group and the whole group is lifted to a level of whatever that just makes the whole group go into bow, or what, you know, these miraculous things that can just happen when you're just breathing and being with and surrendering in and letting, like, that it's the purification of that you can hold deeper and deeper and larger space of also not attracting but expanding the awareness and the love and the capacity for people around you and with you. It is it's a little bit like, I want to share with you, like if you start the journey of surrender, it's a little bit like being pregnant. You can't in the seventh month of pregnancy, you can't say to God, hey, can you just put this pregnancy on hold, just 5 minutes, 10 minutes, okay? It's like, please just put it on hold. I need to be not pregnant for a while, you know? And it's like, well, something is not listening there. The pregnancy goes on, right? You don't get a 5 minutes break, but you get the abundance of being pregnant. You get to be a creator. You get to be a part of creation, which is incredible. You know, so I am questioning, like, is surrender really a choice when it comes to your path? I'd love for you to be curious about that. I'd love for you to be in curiosity on, like, where am I at? Can I more courageously move into surrender, the not knowing? Even if it is in the daily life with your spouse, you know, you're quarreling. Can you be the person that says, like, okay, I can bring a deeper level of authenticity here. I can actually surrender. Not fading out, not being a weak, but courageously being willing to bring myself into a deeper layer of connection, surrendering into deeper parts of me in truth. Yeah.
Any follow-up, Laura? Yeah.
Yeah, just I guess the question I have this question about what purification is and what purity is. Like, it doesn't seem like purity is, you know, only drinking water and living off alfalfa sprouts. You know, it's like it seems like it's actually much more subtle than that. So yeah, could you describe what purification, what it is?
So for me, that is very much into the connection. Like, if we think about source or God or whatever you wish to see as something that is bigger than you or whatever, that for me is an emanation of light. and to the degree that I can receive the emanation of light will correspond to how much homework and how much I have cleansed my own system to be able to receive and bring that through my system, right? So the bigger job that I have done inside of my column, if you look upon my body as my column, the possibility for me to bring higher and higher levels of purity of that light correlates to what degree I have made my column pure, right? I don't know if that was really elegantly said because that just came. I have no idea. Alanja Forsberg, do you have something to add on that? Because I think you might.
I do. I don't think of it in terms of purity so much as transparency.
Okay, cool.
The polishing action is one of increasing clarification. I notice my holdbacks. I notice my assumptions. I notice all the places where there's things that are in contradiction. So I come to work through the issues that create disconnections in myself, because those create places where light gets stuck. They create it's like looking into a crystal and there's a fracture. If I can heal the fracture, I can clarify the crystal. If I find a piece that's opaque, I'm seeking to clarify what is hidden there. What is the insight that would allow me to see into that opacity? So in effect, there's a lot of self-reflection. There's a lot of sort of looking at oneself to find the places where one is unclear. And through the exercise of clarification, that we become a vessel, a vehicle capable of transmitting light.
Thank you. And Forrest, are you called Alanja now? But it's good. I really would like, Alanja, do you have something to say here? If not,
When it comes to purification, I'm probably not the most enlightened person in the universe. I like to think about purification to be radical honest. At the core of your heart, be so radical honest and bring forth. It doesn't need to be pure, it can be messy, it can be hurtful for that sake, but it comes from a deeper level of yourself. And is that pure or is it not? I don't know what it may lead to, but radical honesty is a way for me to own that I'm a living being. I'm not a god or goddess, nothing like that. I'm a human being, and I can hold both parts, you know, the black and the white, and the pure and the messy, and all of that. And that I feel the life shines through all of that. Purification could very easily be an ideology, a kind of new age fantasy of what is real. But I stick with what I feel is the most alive and honest expression of my life right now, and in connection with you.
thank you. And then also for me, it's like, as a therapist, like all the possibilities and chances we get to visit our traumas and to heal and to really find and to hold the whole of ourselves, and to get the trauma parts and the spiritual potential parts to come into alignment so we become whole. It's not to become this or that. It's like really learning how to live a life that has this circle in it, that has this column in it. There is movement, and I'm moving and I am expanding and I am operating in this world with my self-leadership and becoming aware of my self-leadership. And surrender is a good way to really get a hold of that as well. Because you'll constantly be in discussion. Is it my ego? Is it me? And so I don't know how many thousand hours I've been in bow, like when I don't know what to do and I'm frustrated and I don't know if I'm going to act. Is this from my ego? Is it from a part of me that is greedy? Or is it a part of me that actually sees that this needs to be done and it's correct? Sometimes I actually don't know. So what I do is like, I actually bow. I'm on the floor and I bow. I surrender. And this is one of the leading, guiding, living forms for me, is that I actually do bow. And in that, there's a space I can sometimes just feel my ego melting. And then I will have to rise up in awe for what I'm asked to do. Right? I hope this gives you inspiration. I hope it brings curiosity. And I really, really wish for you to have a beautiful journey on your surrendering path in virtue. Thank you.
Beautiful. Yeah, before we close out, just wanted to thank you so much for coming to the Stoa today. People have been privately messaging me, we should have a series on surrender. So perhaps you can come back and we can figure out how to be connoisseurs of this thing we're calling surrender here. So thank you so much for coming to the Stoa. And the next event we have is at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Daniel Schmachtenberger will be here talking about a health index. So you can check that out, thestoa.ca. That being said, Anja, everyone, thank you so much for coming to Stoa.
Thank you. Thank you, Forrest, and Odinge also for being with me and for everyone here. Thank you so much. Thank you.